Welcome, dear friends, to the next episode of EndoTalks. And this is a very special episode. I can tell you we have all been waiting for quite some time because we have a very special topic today. And this topic is screening colonoscopy. Of course, for this, we also need a very special guest, which is Michael Bretthauer from Oslo. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Thomas.
I think we all have been waiting for this moment for quite some time, the Nordic study. What's the Nordic study?
Oh,
the Nordic study
yes.
is a study on screening colonoscopy, actually the first one. But please explain to us.
Yeah, I have been waiting for this moment for more than 15 years. So this is very exciting for me. And I think you are excited as well, as I can understand, Thomas. The Nordic study or the Nordic trial is a randomized controlled trial of screening colonoscopy versus no screening. So it's a large randomized study that we have been doing for the past 15 years. We started this project in 2004, and we are now finally in the position where we can publish 10-year results of screening, which, of course, as you said, is anticipated by a lot of people who are interested in gastroenterology and cancer screening in the world.
So let's look at the data. Mm-hmm. Michael, let's start with the logistics, the methodology, before we finally get to the results. So maybe you tell us who was participating and how you got the cases, etc.
Yes. So as I said, we were so courageous to have the idea and then have also the money and the infrastructure to do a randomized trial of colonoscopy screening, which is, of course, as you know, this is now, it's almost too late to come with such a study because everybody or most people have are doing colonoscopy or at least considering it. When we started this 15 years ago, we got a lot of pushback because we were so crazy to offer screening colonoscopy to people out there in the population. There were many people who said, you are crazy, you cannot do this is far too invasive. But we did it anyway. So we were in 4 countries. So this study plays out in 4 countries.
Yeah, you said 4 countries. How many centers were there in each country?
Yes. So you can see it on the slide here for those of you who are watching. So 4 countries, the 4 countries were Norway, Poland, Sweden, and the Netherlands. So 4 countries, 2 countries in Scandinavia, then Poland and the Netherlands. And we established for this trial the screening centers at the hospitals that were participating. And it was important that there was no screening going on in these areas because we wanted the no screening control group to understand how effective the colonoscopy is amongst the people who were randomized to colonoscopy. So we established 2 centers in the south of Norway. We established 6 centers in the middle of Sweden, 6 hospitals there, which did screening. Then 1 large center in Warsaw. They were doing all the colonoscopies in Poland, which is the largest contribution. And then 2 centers in the Netherlands. And all these centers were handpicked. And at all these centers, people did a great job in not only doing the colonoscopies, but also doing the infrastructure for the whole trial, which included the invitations to screening, the randomization, and then, of course, also scheduling the surveillance for the people with polyps.
Okay, this shows how much infrastructure is needed and how much work has to go into this. That the Dutch people, didn't they start their FIT activities already, or was this later? And what happened to the Dutch data?
Yes, that is a very good question. So yes, so there were in some of the countries, to start with in the Netherlands and Poland, there was some screening activity going on, but not in the areas and with the people who were eligible for the trial. So either that was in other areas of the countries or in other age groups. So we were very meticulous about that, of course, to keep the contamination, so that is the people who are randomized to no screening, then going to screening, to keep that at a very low level, because obviously that was what would jeopardize the trial. The Netherlands were not able, however, and that was only a problem that we encountered this year when we prepared for the analysis. The Netherlands were not able for this particular paper that we are having today to contribute with data because of the new GDPR regulation of the European Union. It's a very sad thing, but for now we could not get data from the people who were randomized to no screening from the Netherlands. We could get that from the other countries, but the Dutch cancer registry said no, and we're still fighting with them, and we'll probably need a lot of lawyer time to fix that issue.
Okay, interesting to learn about the influences outside of science,
yes,
which finally influence the outcome. So
it is. Yes.
We still keep the tension high. We don't talk about the results yet. Tell us a little bit more about methodology. How did you randomize your patients and all these things?
Yes, and you can see that on this slide. So the target group of people were people who were healthy or presumptively healthy, who did not have any symptoms of colorectal cancer, between 55 and 64 years of age. And basically, I like to call this not a population-based trial, but really a population trial, because all the people who were living around these screening centers that I just mentioned were randomized to either an invitation to colonoscopy screening or no invitation to anything. So we took everybody who lived there and we took their data from the population registries. We got that approved from the ethics committees. Of course, it's a little unusual not to ask people first, but we did it because we wanted that population effect of screening, and we randomized them. And only the people who were randomized to colonoscopy then got a letter in the mail and asking them to come to a colonoscopy, and then they could call and schedule their appointment. We gave them an appointment. They could change it. The people who were in the no screening groups, the control group, they were not approached at all. They were not even informed that they were in a randomized trial of colonoscopy screening. They just lived their lives, and the data we were gathering then during follow-up, we got from the registries in these countries. And there was also then, as you understand, a requirement. We needed very good registry data. So all countries in Europe that do not have good registry data for cancer incidence and for death, they could not participate in the trial.
Okay. The next question, which inevitably comes up, is how good was the colonoscopy? So what did you do?
Well, a very good question, and we have summarized this for you out there, our listeners, in this slide. So, as I said, everybody who was in the screening group got offered one colonoscopy. There was no repeat screening, so one colonoscopy, because we wanted to understand what is the effect of one screening colonoscopy over 10 to 15 years, which is what the guidelines recommend. We set up these centers, as I said, dedicated colleagues. They were handpicked by us who did the trial. We were out there. We were training them. We provided them with equipment. If not the latest equipment was there, we made sure that they had good infrastructure, both for the endoscopy, but also, for example, for the histopathology. And we had regular meetings with people to maintain a very good quality of all the colonoscopies in the trial. And of course, at the colonoscopies, as you can see in this slide, all polyps which were detected were removed, just as you would do in an ordinary screening colonoscopy. And of course, all cancers or tumors were biopsied and looked at by dedicated histopathologists.
Okay, a little bit more focused on the colonoscopy. You know, nowadays in the guidelines, ESG and others, there are quality parameters, CEQL, REACH, ADR. So is that a weak point or not?
So as you can see on this slide, the quality in general, as I see it, or as we see it as the study team, was high. We had a CEQL intubation rate of above 96%, which is very good according to standards. Our ADR, no detection rate, was a little over 30%, which is very nice and very good for this primary screening colonoscopy around the 60 years of age, as I have been talking about. And on the adverse event side, there were no perforations. There was one perforation in the Netherlands that we published and reported 6 years ago. No perforation in the data we are currently presenting. and there were a couple of bleedings, but no bleedings that could not be fixed with endoscopic means. Now, I have to tell you one thing, Thomas, and that is that, of course, there were differences between different endoscopists with regard to adenoma detection rate, which is probably the most important of these outcome measures. Everybody was good, but some people were better than other people. And that is, I think, within the normal variation that we see in a lot of centers. And important for us was, as is in the clinic, to make sure that everybody is above a certain threshold for their adenoma detection rates, and then there is always variation.
And we have to say that, for example, in Germany, that's the current average ADR in the countrywide screening program. So that's quite comparable.
Yes, I think that's okay.
So, Michael, let's talk a little bit about the endpoints, because this also has to do with methodology. What were you actually looking at?
Sure. And this is maybe the uniqueness with this trial. There's a couple of other trials coming in the next years who will do the same, but this is like the first one that is out there in the world. The uniqueness here is that we wanted the hard endpoints. We wanted the real data that everybody is interested in, as you said in the beginning of this podcast. And these are, of course, the incidence of colorectal cancer and colorectal cancer mortality. We designed the study so that we would have enough sample size for colorectal cancer mortality that is more difficult than incidence, because there's fewer events, obviously, after 15 years. And we said in the protocol when we started that we would like to have the first look at the data after 10 years, which is today. And then we have a secondary endpoint, which is all-cause mortality. So mortality of all causes also after 10 to 15 years.
Okay, there are usually two ways to look at this. In one way, you take the entire group, including those who don't attend colonoscopy, and the other one is those coming to colonoscopy, the adherence or the uptake. How did you deal with that?
Yes, that's a very good question as well. As we have been talking about, this is a population trial. And we did not ask people first if they would like to be in a trial and then randomize them. We just randomized everybody. And of course, then in all textbooks for clinical trials, it says that you should do intention to treat, or here intention to screen analysis, so where everybody who's randomized is then analyzed. And we did that. And that was our primary endpoint analysis, as you can see here on the slide. However, of course, we did not expect everybody who was invited to come for the colonoscopy. In such a trial, that's the bad thing. If you do it like this, you really get the population effect. But however, the participation rate is not in the 80s or 90s or 95%. It's much lower. Therefore, our secondary analysis were so-called adjusted per protocol analysis. So where we only compare the people who came to the colonoscopy of those randomized with the control groups, the people who did not get an invitation. Now, this is a tricky analysis to do, because obviously there is selection bias and also some other kind of biases between the people who showed up and everybody else. And therefore, this is not our primary analysis, because these analyses are not as trustworthy as the intention to screen analysis, but we show both of them.
Okay, now let's get a little bit closer to results. Let's look at the patient numbers and which groups and how many went to colonoscopy, which I think you have on the next two slides.
Yes. So this now, all of you out there, is the current paper, which comes out today. And this, as I said, is 3 out of the 4 countries. Unfortunately, Netherlands at this time not able to provide data, which I hope will create discussions in itself, hopefully also in the political circus of the Netherlands, because this is not as we wanted it to be. But the 3 countries here, out of the 95,000 patients or participants, I should say, who were originally in the trial, about 10,000 are in the Netherlands. Those are not in this analysis. Here are the 85,000 participants from these 3 countries, Norway, Poland, and Sweden. a couple of exclusions, as you can see on this flow chart, but at the end here in this paper, we have 28,220 patients in the colonoscopy group. So these are the people randomized to colonoscopy. And then we have the double the amount, 56,365, who were randomized to the control group. And these people are in the analysis.
Okay, and did we mention, I don't think we did, how many actually went to colonoscopy, and was this different in the different countries?
Yes, very good question, and obviously very important to understand the results. So obviously the participation rate was not close to 100%, and that is due to the design as we talked about a minute ago. So the overall participation rate you can see on this table 1 in the paper, is 42% across all countries, and this is both for men and women. As you can see, if you go on the same line where the red box is, you can see the participation rate was higher in Norway, about 61%, and it was lower in Poland, 33%, and Sweden was just in the middle with about 40% of people who were randomized who actually came and underwent colonoscopy.
So people in the PI's country were the most compliant ones, whatever reason that was. But you were only going to the endoscopists and not to the patients, Michael, did you?
Right. No, yes. I mean, I think and we have discussed this a lot within the group, why are these differences? And we are not sure, of course, but I think it's about cultural differences. There's always higher participation rates in Norway than in other countries for these kind of things. We have seen that in other studies, and maybe people are in Central Europe are different and probably don't like such offers as much as people in Scandinavia. We are not sure about it, but these are the numbers.
Okay, the question the other way around, in the no screening group, which was double as big.
Yes.
Do you have any account on how many underwent colonoscopy for what reason ever?
Yes, we tracked that as well. I mean, that tracking has been, of course, difficult, but fortunately, I have to say, we had access to a lot of the data from the hospitals in the trial areas, both in all countries, I should say, but most importantly in Poland and Norway, because these countries have, as you can see here, by far the largest contribution. And what we could see, and we are very happy about that, is that there was no increase in colonoscopy activity in the trial areas during the trial. So in other words, obviously people go to colonoscopy all the time for clinical reasons, but there were no more colonoscopies done in the trial areas than before the trial, or in other areas around where we were. So that makes us believe that the colonoscopy screening activity amongst the people who were not invited here in this study to colonoscopy is very, very low, far below 2%, we believe.
Okay, so that's the figure for the background noise.
Yes.
1 to 2%.
Exactly.
Okay, dear friends of endoscopy, now I think we have to let it go. The results are coming.
Okay, well, thank you, Thomas. So here are the results of the study, which is the 10-year data. So people were followed for 10 years. And here, ladies and gentlemen, you see the primary endpoint for colorectal cancer incidence. And this, again, is the intention to treat analysis. And you can see the relative risk there. We can start with that. An 18% reduction of colorectal cancer incidence amongst the screening group compared to the control group, 18%. And if you ask, okay, how many people got cancer? Well, in the group invited to screening, it was 0.98%, so a little less than 1%, while in the no screening group, 1.2% got colorectal cancer across the 10-year follow-up. This is the primary endpoint, and this is the primary analysis for the primary endpoint. Now, as we talked about, we are also interested in the per protocol analysis. As I also told you, we put not so much faith into the per protocol as in this one. We believe this one is the best quality analysis that we currently have. But we also did this, and here you can see that obviously when you go from intention to screen to per protocol, the effects are always getting larger. Here, the risk ratio is 0.629. That means that in the per protocol analysis, which you see here, the risk of colorectal cancer was decreased by 31% in the people who were screened as compared to the control group, 31%. And this is adjusted for baseline variables which are different in the two different groups. So this, you could say, is the best effect one can assume with colonoscopy screening after 10 years for colorectal cancer incidence, 31% reduction. We also looked at cancer stage because this is something that, of course, many epidemiology studies do. They look at cancer stage, so cancer at diagnosis, what stages are there in, and then translate from that to a possible effect of screening. So here are the cancer stages, and these are cancers that are detected both at screening but also after screening. So all the cancers from the moment the patients were randomized to 10 years later are included in here. And as you can see, there is a little more early stage cancer in the screening group as compared to the no screening group, but it's not so pronounced, the difference. But there is a certain stage shift from late cancer to early cancer in the screening group. But I don't think the difference is very big. If you can see, for example, for stage C cancers is 0.23% in the screening group and 0.31 in the no screening group, and then also a little more of the stage D, so the advanced cancers, 0.19% versus 0.17%, so a little larger, but not huge differences, which makes sense if one thinks about the colorectal cancer incidence numbers I just showed you. There's an effect, but it's not very big. And finally, what about death of colorectal cancer? As I told you, this has also been one of the primary endpoints. Now, it's a little early for that now after 10 years because so few people got colorectal cancer, about 1%, 1.2 in the control group, 0.98 in the screening group. And so there is few events for mortality, but here are the data. And there are, again, in these boxes. To make a long story short, there was no significant effect of screening on colorectal cancer mortality at this point in time with a risk ratio of 0.9, so a 10% reduction, but it was not statistically significant, as you can see in the last column of this slide. However, this is intention to treat. When we then go to the per protocol, again, we're not sure if this is really a true estimate, but some people may say this is the best you can get out of this method. Then our analysis here shows that the effect in the per protocol analysis, and we did two different analyses here with two different methodologies, is somewhere between 50% and 38% reduction for mortality. Again, not sure about that if this will hold up, but this is like the largest effect you could get with colonoscopy screening on mortality, as we interpret it at this time, Thomas.
Okay, that's a lot to digest.
Yes.
Well, there was a side remark, Michael, which I had to smile at because most papers you read have long-term results of 2 years. And you're coming here with 10-year results and telling us, well, it's not long-term. Let's wait for 15 years. So let's encourage all the other people doing studies to be a little bit more long-term than 2 or 5 years.
So we can dwell on that about the time of follow-up, Thomas. You can see here in this slide, this is again the incidence that we just had up a couple of minutes ago. The curves cross after 6 years in this study. So in other words, if you look at any study for this outcome and for this screening intervention before 6 years, you may see that actually the screening group has a higher risk as compared to the no screening group. So you would then falsely assume that there is no benefit but potential harm from the examination, which of course is not true. So I think you need to have that long follow-up time of at least 10 years, maybe even longer. We will see that in some years when we do more analysis. But anything before 6 years is just not logical to do, because you need that crossing of the curves, and that does not happen before or after 5 to 6 years.
Okay, we get that. On the other hand, the longer you wait, the more important is the role of follow-up colonoscopies. Adherence to follow-up and many other factors come into play. But this might be the topic of a different EndoTalks. Yes. Let's digest and summarize the whole thing. I think we have a final slide before we have a short discussion.
Yes, so here's the final slide. As we talked about, there's an 18% reduction of colorectal cancer incidence and a 9% reduction in mortality, 9 to 10. The latter one is not significant. These are the primary analysis. When we then move to the per protocol, which is more uncertain, as I said, the effect is somewhere between 28 and 50% for incidence and mortality. So there's no number in this study as of yet that indicates any effect of colonoscopy screening on these endpoints of above 50%. And finally, we didn't show the numbers, Thomas, but there was no effect on all-cause mortality. The numbers were basically the same in the screening group as compared to the no screening group. Well, what does that mean? I mean, for the time being, and many people will be disappointed, I think, there is an effect. I think that's clear. And the effect is on incidence. With regard to mortality, I think maybe we need some more time. But that effect is not as large as some of us wanted it to be. We talk about 80%, 90% in many observational studies, also in some guidelines. Colonoscopy is not that good, unfortunately, and these numbers put colonoscopy about where sigmoidoscopy and FIT screening are. So there's not much of a difference with regard to that.
Okay, that might be disappointing to many of us. If you were asked, why is that so? So you can't blame the colonoscopists. We have seen the data. The quality was pretty good. What is that due to, especially with regards to mortality?
Yes, well, the short answer is I really don't know. But of course, if you want me to give an educated guess, I think number one, for mortality, it's a little too early. That's number one. So we need to wait a couple of more years. But for incidence, and I think it's a little disappointing. I hope that the effect would have been larger. However, there is a couple of things. Number one, the risk of colorectal cancer, so colorectal cancer incidence, is smaller in this study than we had anticipated when we started the study. And I think this is a reflection of decreasing incidence rates of colorectal cancer in many countries in Europe. And many people have said, well, this is because we do screening now. I don't think that's true. I think there is something going on which makes the reduction of colorectal cancer, which of course is great, and we are all happy for that. I don't think it's the screening. It's too early to see that. But of course, if you don't have so much disease out there anymore, then of course the screening intervention also has a lower effect, although the relative effects are probably still there. The absolute effects are getting smaller and smaller, and maybe some people say, well, this is not really significant for me because my risk to start with is rather low. So I think these two things together may serve partly as an explanation. And then number three is, Thomas, well, I mean, we may have oversold this. I mean, colonoscopy, if you look at other cancer screening, no screening is in the 70, 80, or 90% reduction of anything. That's not how screening works. And I think what we see here now is the same thing. Colonoscopy is just not as effective. There are polyps we don't detect, and these may grow. And obviously, new polyps grow after we do the colonoscopy, even though we offer surveillance for the people who have polyps. we miss polyps, both polyps which are there when we are in the colon, and then polyps that we don't see because we're not taking people back. So that's just the name of the game. I don't think we can probably expect much more of colonoscopy screening or any screening. And then it's up to everybody to decide if such an effect is okay to do a colonoscopy or maybe not.
Okay, maybe one other issue with regards to mortality, probably the oncologic treatment has also become better. Yes. During the study period, and still going to improve in small steps. And this may have an effect on the mortality rates.
Oh, absolutely. I think, yes. So you have these two things. I mentioned the incidence, which is going down anyways. I don't think it has anything to do with screening. And then of the people who get the cancer, the prognosis is so much better now. We have in this study, which is a reflection of the clinical service in the countries. In this study, we have a case fatality rate of 30%, 30, case fatality of 30%, which is a lot lower than 10, 15 years ago, where it was at 50, 55, 60% even, across all stages. So the prognosis is much better because the oncologists are doing better. They have a lot more treatment armamentarium as they have before. And of course that makes the case for screening more difficult because people are just surviving their cancers.
Right. So the final conclusion of the two of us could be, ladies and gentlemen, that we are disappointed. We would have expected better results, but in the choice of the test, we have to wait for another or other studies, the first of which probably will appear next year. That's the FIT versus colonoscopy trial from Spain. Yes. Do you know anything about that? Have you spoken to the people there?
Yeah, we talk, so I hope they are going to have their data out, but maybe in the beginning of the year, at least the first quarter. So I'm very much looking forward to that because they have the two arms. They have FIT screening and colonoscopy screening. Let me also say, Thomas, that, when I first saw these numbers, I was also kind of disappointed. However, this is what science is about. We would like to find out the effects or the benefits and the harms of something. And because we are driven as scientists and as scientific physicians, we're driven by that curiosity, and that curiosity also involves doubt. Everything needs to be doubted all the time. So this is what we have, and I don't think we should be disappointed. I think we should embrace the results, and we should communicate it to the public. And then we should still offer screening, I think, but I think we should communicate these numbers, and then people have to decide if they would like to get a colonoscopy or not. It's not really up to us.
That's a wonderful conclusion. There's nothing to add, Michael. I thank you very, very much. I thank those who were listening, and I'm sure we'll come back soon. Michael has more data. And next year we'll all meet for the FIT colonoscopy. So the colon will keep us going in EndoTalks. And thank you very, very much again, Michael.
Thank you so much for having been here. It was a great pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, keep us watching. We have a lot of topics on EndoTalks. We'll come back very soon with another study which comes out from Michael Bretthauer's group. It's an analysis of all the big sigmoidoscopy trials. And here we have the first indirect comparison, and we'll be back with other topics as well. Thank you very much.